It's 2009 and Aprilia launches its brand new introduction to the Superbike class with its all-new RSV4. But the story for the Aprilia Superbike we know today as the RSV4 started out before the year 2009, way before the year 2009, all the way back in 1998 with a different bike with another name, known to us as the RSV Mille. But before we talk about the Mille, we need to look back further into Aprilia themselves, because up until this point, they were not known for making high-end superbike motorcycles. They were known for something almost completely on the other side of the spectrum. The beginning of Aprilia's legacy stretches all the way back to a different era, not even just a different era in motorcycles, but a different era in the world. Europe was home to the battleground of one of the most deadliest events in human history, World War II. In 1945, we finally saw the end of that horrific war, and after seeing the ugly side of humanity, we now got to experience the other side. With war ended brought new opportunity, with destruction brings construction, and one small company located in war-torn Italy rose up and started a business. A two-wheeled business. A business of creating bicycles. And that was the beginning of Aprilia, established in 1945 as a bicycle company. Fast forward 23 years later, Aprilia extends its production from bicycles to its first 50cc motorcycle. And eventually in 1992, Aprilia released their first two-stroke RS125 to the world, bringing on the start of Aprilia's racing heritage. And now that brings us back to 1998, where the first RSV was born, the Mille. Aprilia derived the name RSV from Racing Series V Twin, RSV. And as the name suggests, the Mille was created for Aprilia to fight in the World Superbike Championship. Mille is Italian for 1,000. The Aprilia RSV Mille featured a 998cc V-twin engine, hence the name Racing Series V-twin 1000 Mille. Originally, the Mille was released as the standard model in 1998, but in 1999 the Mille was released in 3 different flavors. You had the standard, and now the R and the SP models were added. The R model was a lighter, higher spec version of the standard Mille. It featured Öhlins suspension, an Öhlins steering damper, forged aluminum wheels, a carbon fiber front fender, and a shorter subframe with no passenger support. The SP model, which stands for Sport Production, was a real homologated version of the Superbike World Championship. Only 150 of these bikes were made, which was the minimum required for homologation rules for Superbike World Championship. This SP was mostly the same as the R model, but it had a special short-stroke version of the 60-degree V-twin engine. Developed by Cosworth Motors, this shorter-stroke version had a higher rev limit. The SP also had an adjustable frame, which meant that the headstock and swing arm and engine mounts were all adjustable, along with a bunch of small internal changes inside the motor, giving this the most power out of all of the variations of the Mille. This bike is extremely rare and valuable and completely a collectible today, but back then, this was the homologated race bike Aprilia used in World Superbike. The standard Mille put out a groundbreaking 128 horsepower from its carbureted-fed 998cc V-twin engine, and had a top speed of around 167 miles per hour. It had upside-down telescopic adjustable forks with spring preload, rebound, and compression damping. Showa was standard, but as mentioned earlier, Öhlins was featured on the R model. The rear in the standard was a Sachs model, and like the front, the R model also had Öhlins in the rear. Stopping this new Superbike was a pair of massive 320mm floating discs paired with 4 piston Brembo brakes for the front, and a single 220mm dual piston Brembo for the rear. The final curb weight of the Mille was 463 pounds. Entering World Superbike in 1999, the Aprilia RSV Mille, otherwise known as the RSV 1000, raced by Peter Goddard, placed 5th in the Nürburgring Championship round. falling behind Kawasaki's ZX7RR, Ducati's 996, Honda's RC45, and again, Ducati's 996. Eager to show off its competitiveness, in 2000, Aprilia hired Troy Corser to race the Mille. Corser did manage to improve Aprilia's positioning, up from last year's 5th place to now 3rd place, losing only to Haga with Yamaha and Colin Edwards with the all-new Honda RC51, which took 1st place. Aprilia's new Superbike saw great success, not just on the track, but also in dealerships, going well above sale expectations. Over 11,000 bikes were sold worldwide. Due to all their success, in 2001, Aprilia made some big updates to their Superbike. Aprilia modified over 200 parts off of their old version of the Mille, bringing us an improved, not just aesthetically, but also technically, motorcycle. To summarize most of these changes, Aprilia changed nearly every fairing on the Mille, from the tail to the headlight. The fuel tank was also shortened and lowered to improve the riding position and further aid in aerodynamics, along with other small changes. Aerodynamics and weight reduction was their goal, and they achieved that by utilizing a new plastic headlight, new exhaust system, and a new intake system. Although it resembles its predecessor a lot, you can easily spot the 2001 model by looking at the side fairing under the seat for the screens. The engine was also majorly modified with lots of internal changes. The heads and pistons were overhauled along with raising the intake camshafts. The intake valves were increased in size, and the intake pipes were completely redesigned around the new cams and valves. Electronic fuel injection was added, and a CDI with TSI system integrated, utilizing 2 spark plugs per cylinder. All of these changes resulted in a power increase from 128 to 130 horsepower. Aprilia's goal was to not only improve power, but to smooth out the engine and improve balance. The frame was also improved. Constructed from a double aluminum and silicone alloy beam, the frame was confirmed as having the highest degree of torsional strength for a production motorcycle at this time. This new frame provided higher engine mounts and gave a new engine positioning. This resulted in a raised swing arm pivot and a new steering angle. Due to these geometry changes, traction was improved along with a better center of gravity to improve handling and corner entry speed. As for the standard model of the Mille, the steering damper was deleted as Aprilia announced it was no longer necessary given these geometry changes. The suspension was also overhauled, featuring a 43mm inverted Showa front forks and now an improved Sachs integrated aluminum shock absorber for the rear. Despite the positive trends with the Mille, in World Superbike the bike took a step back as Corsa and Aprilia fell into 4th place, falling behind the Honda once again and now the Ducati also. In 2002, Aprilia and Corsa parted ways, and now Noriyuki Haga has joined up with Aprilia to represent the Mille. As a result of this new partnership, Aprilia spec'd out a limited production run of 300 units of the RSV Mille R Haga replica version. This special version of the Mille utilized the same livery as Haga. It also came kitted out with a new circuit kit which included a full Akrapovic titanium exhaust system and EPROM injection kit. The regular Mille also got updated Brembo monoblock 4-pad calipers, which was meant to improve braking performance and feel. Hopes were high for Haga, but unfortunately they fell short as Haga once again fell in 4th place behind Honda and Ducati. 2003 was the Mille's swan song, as it was the final year it was produced, but it didn't go out without any updates. The gear ratios were changed to give a slightly closer ratio gearbox. The exhaust system, tailpiece, and front fender were all redesigned as well. As for their racing adventures, 2 big changes happened in 2003. The biggest change being the departure from World Superbike and the end of the Mille's racing career. The second change was that Aprilia signed Colin Edwards to their team, a classic "if you can't beat them, recruit them" philosophy. This move to recruit Edwards sparked another special production replica known as the RSV Mille R Edwards replica, which had a livery inspired by the Aprilia RS Cube MotoGP motorcycle ridden by Colin Edwards. This bike also featured a circuit kit, a Akrapovic exhaust, a more pressurized airbox, an EPROM ejection kit, and 57mm throttle bodies. After a 5-year run, the Mille was replaced by an all-new motorcycle called the RSV 1000R, released for the 2004 model year. Once again, Aprilia offered their Superbike in 3 different variations: the R version, which is now their standard model, the R Factory version, which is the higher spec version of the R version, and finally the limited edition version called the RSV 1000R Nera. The new RSV 1000R produced a respectable 139 horsepower and 78.9 foot-pound of torque, named the V60 Magnesium, as it employs magnesium rocker box and clutch covers which save approximately 3 pounds. Although the 60-degree V-angled remained, new valve springs, larger intake ports, and oval section exhaust manifolds are included in the top-end updates. The connecting rods were also strengthened and the twin counterbalances were redesigned. The intake was also changed to utilize a replacement panel type filter, which was less restrictive and allowed the airbox volume to be increased to 10.3 liters. This airbox was fed by a central ram air intake that Aprilia calls the air runner, as it's located directly between the headlights where pressure is at the greatest. The power wasn't the only thing changed, as this bike supported an all-new aluminum chassis wrapped in gorgeous bodywork sculpted by Martin Longmore, the same man that helped design the Audi TT sports car. This aluminum frame helped centralize the weight, which allowed Aprilia to move the engine for better lateral balance. They were also able to lower the bike's center of gravity thanks to this reduced steering rake. The rear subframe was also lowered and made of thinner tubing for reduced weight. This helped aid the bike in having a lower seat height and narrow the frame section between the rider's knees. All these changes lowered the bike by 25mm while keeping the exact same 55.7-inch wheelbase. Aprilia claims that the new chassis is 5% stiffer, yet loses 1.34 pounds. These changes may seem insignificant, but when you are improving a bike to compete at the highest level, these small changes make a big difference. The bike features fully adjustable 43mm inverted Showa forks mounted to a new triple clamp assembly. The rear linkage was also revised to feature a Sachs piggyback reservoir shock along with a revised linkage. Stopping this Superbike is a pair of Brembo 4-piston calipers with 4 individual pads working against floating 320mm stainless rotors up front. Aprilia also paired these calipers with stainless steel brake lines for the front and rear, and speaking of the rear caliper also features a Brembo 2-piston unit. To go back to the bodywork, once again created by Martin Longmore, this bodywork was not only improved in the looks department from the Mille, but also has been improved to feature 11 fewer pieces, which helped reduce the number of panel seams. This bike also comes fitted with a compact LED taillight. Also added was flush-mounted turn signals for the front and the rear. Worth noting is that as a result of a lowered seat height of about 1/2 inch and even lowering the foot pegs by 2.2 inches, made for a more comfortable seating position by allowing more legroom. This bike also feels less bulky now that the frame was thinned by the rider's knees. Now back to the factory edition. The changes with this model was the addition of fully adjustable Öhlins front and rear suspension, along with an Öhlins steering damper, blue anodized forged aluminum wheels, and a black anodized frame, along with some small carbon fiber pieces. And finally the Nera version, which was the limited production racing version of the RSV 1000R. Built to a super limited 200 units, featured carbon fiber fairings, magnesium wheels, a full titanium exhaust, titanium nuts and bolts and fasteners, which resulted in a reduction of weight by 22 pounds. "2005 had some minor changes to the RSV 1000R. New fuel injection mapping was implemented, and radial-mounted front calipers were now standard. A new front fender was added, and white lens taillight and turn signals, and also a new optional rear seat cover and new seat upholstery. Outside of that, it was completely the same. There's no note of a power increase, but different sources mention that the 2005 model made 143 horsepower. In 2006, Aprilia added a gold anodized frame for their factory edition. Although they exited MotoGP, the RSV 1000R did compete in the Master Bike contest, which is held annually to decide the best sport bikes of the year, which in the Maxi Sport category, the RSV 1000R won, beating out the Suzuki GSX-R 750 and Ducati 99S. Also important to note that the RSV1000R model was now standard with Öhlins forks. Still no steering damper, although the mounting points are present. The years kept going, but no changes for the RSV1000R happened. Along with the absence of updates, we also saw no return to MotoGP for the rest of the RSV1000R's run up until 2010, when Aprilia discontinued the RSV1000R forever. A year before Aprilia axed their RSV1000R, they brought out a new competitor. Aprilia no longer wanted MotoGP, now they had their eyes set back once again on World Superbike. But in order to compete in World Superbike, the two-cylinder 998cc V-twin would no longer cut it. As per the rules, World Superbike now allows up to 999cc four-cylinder bikes to compete. So Aprilia needed a new bike with a new engine, and thus the V4 was born. Aprilia named their new superbike the RSV4, and as you would expect, the 4 stood for 4-cylinder, as this superbike had a V4 powering it, which was the only V4 competing in World Superbike at this time. In piloting this new V4 superbike was Italian Grand Prix motorcycle road racer Max Biaggi to compete in World Superbike for the 2009 season. This all-new RSV4 was equipped with a 65-degree 999cc V4 engine, producing a very respectable 177 horsepower at 12,500 RPM and 85 foot-pound of torque at 10,000 RPM. Aprilia released 2 iterations of the RSV4, one being the standard and the other one being, of course, the factory edition. The engine is the exact same on both models, and along with that, both got an updated twin-spar aluminum chassis with adjustable engine mounts, adjustable swing arm, fully adjustable Öhlins suspension for the factory, and Showa for the standard. Both did get ride-by-wire throttle, 3 different fuel injection maps, which vary the power intensity, along with variable length inlet tacks and an all-new electronic traction control system. Now let's get back to the engine. This is Aprilia's most revolutionary and most powerful engine they had ever developed at this time. This 65-degree V4 was Aprilia's answer to World Superbike. The new engine uses multi-mapping ride-by-wire technology, which allows for fine-tuning engine control and offers virtually infinite opportunities for power delivery and traction control. The reason why Aprilia went with such a narrow V layout was to have an incredibly narrow engine. This in turn has allowed the weight to be centralized, and as a result, chassis performance was also dramatically improved thanks to the shortened wheelbase while also promoting a longer swing arm. Because of this narrow V4 configuration, a longer stroke was able to be used as well, which helped the engine breathe at the top end of the power band. This allowed the engine to obtain high speeds without having to extend the width of the crankcase, which all resulted in better aerodynamics and maneuverability. Along with this, the RSV4 has an all-new fairing design, which was developed in a wind tunnel with an emphasis on reducing size to promote aerodynamics. One of the key features of this new Aprilia is the triple headlight cluster, which makes the RSV4 instantly recognizable and unique, a very modern and good-looking design for the front end of this bike. The only change internally between the factory and the R model is that the factory edition got movable intake trumpets, whereas they are fixed on the R model. This is the difference of about 5 peak horsepower. The factory also comes with Öhlins suspension, lighter weight wheels, and an adjustable swing arm pivot point. Now, being Italian, reliability is not often the selling point. In this generation, RSV4 proved that correct. In fact, the press unveiling of the RSV4 was cut short after 5 of the bikes suffered terminal connecting rod failures. Senior road tester Michael Neves was there, and he mentioned that after 2 20-minute sessions at high speeds, he had no issues with his RSV4R, but that 5 other bikes had expired. Michael mentioned that it was extremely unusual for something like this to happen to a modern motorcycle, even Aprilia, which Michael even proclaimed that their machines were more Honda-like than any other Italian manufacturer and that their engines are usually bomb-proof. These connecting rod failures were serious, and launched an investigation on the bikes ahead of their debut launch. Aprilia was able to fix the problem before the bikes were even sold to the public, but it was still an embarrassing launch and definitely shakes some potential buyers away from picking up the highly anticipated RSV4. It's important to note that these bikes are race bikes, and engine reliability was just never going to be a selling point for them, even though by and large they were not necessarily unreliable. But you just know you are not getting the traditional Japanese superbike like a Honda, you are getting something Italian, so reliability may always be in the back of your mind. And continuing with that trend, the valve adjustments are called for every 6,000 miles. And as much as we love that V4 engine for the sound and performance, it is not easy to work on. It's very compact, and you have two heads to deal with, unlike a traditional inline 4 where you only have one. Now that we got all of the bad out of the way, let's go back to the good though. Again, 180 horsepower in 2009. And it's not just any horsepower, it's horsepower from a V4, which makes a constant and linear amount of low end through mid-range and finally top end power and torque. It is one of the best engine configurations of all time, and best of all, it sounds like this. No matter what exhaust you put on your ZX-10R, it will not sound like that. Aprilia created more than just a powerful and great sounding engine. Aprilia also spent a lot of time crafting and developing the perfect frame for the RSV4. Originally, Aprilia explored 4 different frame options before deciding on one. Aprilia landed on the option that gave the best performance without blowing the budget completely out of the water. The final chassis is made of cast and pressed aluminum welded together. So given all of these changes with the all-new RSV4, Biaggi took to World Superbike to fight for the honor and glory and paycheck of Aprilia motorcycles, and he managed to place number 4, trailing behind Ducati and Yamaha. Now, although it was impressive and a good feat to finish top 5 in World Superbike, it is, however, not what Aprilia set out to prove. They wanted to win it all. They wanted that number 1 spot. So taken to the racetrack for the 2010 season, Biaggi and Aprilia went to war. The main competitors standing in their way was Leon Halsam with Suzuki and Carlos Checa from Ducati. The first round in Australia went to a split between Halsam and Checa. However, Biaggi battled back, winning both races in Portugal in round 2. And not only that, but in round 7 in the United States at Miller Motorsports Park, Biaggi once again swept both races, and he even followed that up in the next round, round 8, in San Marino, where he again swept both races. And then in round 9, Biaggi split with Jonathan Rea in the Czech Republic. And in the final race in France at the end of round 13, Biaggi finished strong with a first place victory to wrap up the season. And with these results, we see that in 3rd place, Checa finished with 297 points and 3 races won. Followed by 2nd place is Halsam with 2 first place victories and 376 points. And finally, our champion and first ever Aprilia World Superbike winner, Max Biaggi, with an impressive 451 points and 10 first place victories out of 26 races. Max Biaggi finally did it. He made history in 2010 when he brought home the first Superbike championship to Aprilia, and doing so in convincing fashion. The RSV4 is now a household name and has earned respect amongst all of its peers as a legitimate and competitive superbike. Aprilia's domination in World Superbike Championship has given rise to a special edition of their RSV4. Aprilia calls it the RSV4 Factory APRC Special Edition. The idea behind this special APRC edition of their RSV4 was that it was starting to inherit more of that trickle-down features and technology from Aprilia's world-winning Superbike. And as a result, this edition of the RSV4 was given a whole slew of new features, mainly in the electronics department, as it got what Aprilia calls Advanced APRC Electronics Package, which stands for Aprilia's Performance Ride Control. This basically added traction control, which was controllable by 2 paddles on the left clip-on to allow you to change traction control levels on the fly at any time. It also has wheelie control, launch control, a quick shifter, all controlled via gyros and accelerometers. Now, the electronics stole the show as the main attraction, but it wasn't the only update. This new APRC engine was also improved for better lubrication and closed space gears to help aid in better acceleration. A new lighter-weight exhaust system was added, along with butterfly valve management to help suit the ride-by-wire mapping for improved breathing and efficiency throughout the entire rev range. However, despite the celebration of this amazing victory with a new special edition model for the public, 2011 led to a whole slew of issues for Biaggi and Aprilia on the racetrack. Starting with the new rule changes for World Superbike 2011 resulted in an end to Aprilia's gear-driven cams. You see, Aprilia was taking advantage of a loophole in the 2010 season by fitting their Superbike machines with gear-driven cams, whereas their homologated production bikes were driven by chains. The rule originally read, the method of cam chain, belts, or gears, must remain as on the homologated motorcycle, unless a complete kit is available through normal commercial channels. However, in 2011, that last part of the sentence, unless a complete kit is available, has been dropped. So essentially, Aprilia needed to make a new street bike version of their bikes that used gear-driven cams, or they were simply not allowed to have them on their MotoGP bike. A change that makes a lot of sense. That is why homologation rules do exist in the first place. So with the 2011 World Superbike season underway and Biaggi now on the cam chain driven Superbike, the races were off. And started promising enough, in first round Biaggi did manage to achieve the fastest lap in both races. However, he failed to catch Carlos Checa, and Carlos managed to sweep the Australian races. And it didn't get much better after that. In the second race of round 2, Biaggi was disqualified due to him jumping the start. Off to a bad start, Biaggi did hold his own in round 4, where he managed to set the fastest lap time in both races, and he even split round 7 and 8 with Marco Melandri. However, disaster struck in round 9 in Germany when Biaggi suffered a broken foot during practice. This put an early end to his season as he was unable to race again. Despite not participating in the last 3 rounds and being disqualified from a race, Biaggi still managed to finish in 3rd place behind Yamaha. After that disappointing season, the 2012 season was upon us, and Biaggi and Aprilia were eager to get back to that championship podium. One quick note about the street RSV4. Aprilia changed the naming of their bikes to call them the RSV4 APRC and the APRC Factory, both versions having the same technologies as last year's APRC version, hence the name change. Now back to World Superbike. The opening race in Australia, Biaggi came out swinging. With a fastest lap and a winning race, he was back on top. The next race went to an old adversary, Carlos Checa, with both racers splitting in the first round. Checa swung back hard with a sweep in the second round. As things were starting to shape up for another season for Ducati, Checa ended up slipping a bit, with a lackluster performance from Checa until round 6, where he split with Melandri and then proceeded to not win another race again for the entire season. However, Biaggi was working his magic. By sweeping round 7 and then splitting rounds 8, Biaggi's main threat was Marco Melandri of BMW with the S1000RR and Thomas Sykes of Kawasaki with the ZX10R. The battles went on between the 3 of these, Melandri winning 6 races, and although Sykes didn't win as many first place races, he consistently finished within top 5 of most of his races. This led to an incredibly close race between Biaggi and Sykes, and Biaggi ended up coming out on top by just 1/2 of a point. Biaggi and Aprilia were once again World Superbike champions, and this time for the 2012 World Superbike season. But in a bittersweet fashion, Biaggi decided that he was going to retire from racing. He wanted to go on top after winning 2 of the last 3 seasons he competed in, leaving behind an incredible legacy as he walked away from the sport. With Biaggi retiring and Aprilia now hoisting up 2 Superbike trophies, an update was made to their all-new 2013 RSV4. Aprilia released a new special edition version of the RSV4 with improved performance and boasted several new features. Aprilia called this version the RSV4 Factory ABS SBK Special Edition. Horsepower was improved from 180 to 184 at 12,500 RPM, and torque was also improved from 84 foot-pound to 86 foot-pound at 10,000 RPM. Also, 3-level dual-channel ABS system was added, as well as Brembo M430 calipers. Fuel capacity was also upgraded by about a half a gallon. Also, now Aprilia offers an additional ABS model. Now, miraculously, with Biaggi's retirement, Aprilia didn't actually fall as far as you might expect. Teammate Eugene Laverty, who previously placed in 6th place, stepped up to the plate and took 2nd place in the 2013 season, narrowly losing to Sykes by 23 points. It's also worth noting that Aprilia essentially finished with 4 of the top 7 places with different riders on the RSV4, which shows that the RSV4 was still very competitive and poised to win again. And in 2014, Laverty switched to Suzuki, leaving the lead position to Sylvain Guintoli. And these were the first impressions when he joined Aprilia.
Yeah, the first impression is I'm excited to get back to racing, to get back on the bike. You know, with the new colors like this, I really like the new livery, so I'm happy. I can't wait to get back to racing and enjoy it.
And with that, the race season has started, as Sylvain battled Thomas Sykes for the World Superbike Championship. Sykes battled hard, winning 1st place in 8 different races. However, he fell to 3rd and 4th place more than a few times. And although Guintoli only won 5 races, he managed to get 2nd place 8 times, meaning that he finished top 2 in 13 of the 26 races. This led to another championship for Aprilia, as Guintoli earned 416 points, narrowly beating out Sykes. 2015 was another bittersweet year for Aprilia. First off, for the sweet part, the RSV4 got a major update, along with a new additional model. The 2 different variations being sold now were the RR and now the RF. This new RF version featured Olin suspension, forged aluminum wheels, and a new graphic kit. Both models had their electronics refined and the ergonomics were tweaked. Because of the new rule changes in World Superbike, the street iteration of the RSV4 had to be as close as possible to the racing version, and as a result, many changes were made, including a redesigned airbox, reshaped forged camshafts, new valve springs, larger titanium valves. Even the combustion chambers are CNC machined in order to help keep the compression ratio as consistent as possible for each cylinder. And it doesn't stop there, as the pistons, connecting rods, and upper engine cases are all now lighter, along with many other small internal changes. And with that, all of these changes to the engine generated an increase in power. Now the RSV4 makes 201 horsepower and 85 foot-pound of torque, making the RSV4 one of the most powerful motorcycles being sold to the public. And now for the bitter part. On the racetrack for the 2015 season was the first real down year for the Aprilia RSV4. With Guintoli switching to Honda, Halsem and Torres led Aprilia to 4th and 5th place with a competitive and respectable finish, but not good enough for a championship or the standard that Aprilia has quickly set up for themselves with their RSV4. And in 2016, it didn't get any better either, with Aprilia finishing at number 10 with Lorenzo Savadori, and in 2017 once again finishing in 10th place with Laverty. And finally in 2018, Aprilia once again finished in 8th place, without showing any signs of improvement. And in 2019, on the 10th anniversary of the RSV4, Aprilia did something that nobody saw coming. They added more power. Yes, more power out of their already ridiculously overpowered Superbike. Aprilia decided that 201 horsepower was simply not enough. So for their flagship RSV4 Factory model, power was bumped up to 217 horsepower. They did it by increasing the size of their V4 engine from 999cc to 1078cc. The base model RR version still uses the Superbike legal 999cc motor with the measly 201 horsepower, but if you want the fastest version of the RSV4, then the 217 horsepower factory edition was the one to get, and torque was also improved to 90 foot-pound. The factory's engine was larger thanks to its cylinder bore being bumped up to 81mm, along with larger valves, different cam profile, new compression ratio, and now utilizing 48mm throttle bodies featuring 2 injectors each. The factory didn't just get a boost in engine power either, they also added new aero. More specifically, winglets were developed to increase stability during hard braking and helping to keep that front end down during intense acceleration, thus proving these winglets were functional and not just there for looks, even though they do make the bike look more badass. And if that wasn't enough, the winglets, front fender, and muffler guard were all made out of carbon fiber. The factory also came standard with an Akrapovic exhaust and forged aluminum wheels. The factory was not only more powerful, but it also weighed less too, at just 438 pound curb weight, whereas the RR version weighed 450 pounds. The cost of getting the factory edition model was an extra $7,000, bumping the price up from $17,500 to $24,500. Despite the excitement around this new horsepower and factory version of the RSV4, Aprilia had withdrew their participation in World Superbike for the 2019 season. 2020 was a strange year for Aprilia, and I guess a strange year just in general. But in World Superbike, Aprilia re-entered as a wild card with Ponson to race for 5 rounds. And those 5 rounds were not very noteworthy, as Ponson placed no higher than 12th place in one of his races. And unfortunately, it doesn't get much better after that either. As of 2021, 2022, 2023, and yes, even 2024, the time of this video, there has not been a single Aprilia RSV4 competing in World Superbike. Despite Aprilia's lack of participation in World Superbike, they still continue to build and update their RSV4. And 2021 was another big year for Aprilia. But before we talk about that, I just wanted to mention that I appreciate you all making it this far in this video. A lot of time goes into making these videos, so if you can take a moment and leave a like, that would mean a lot. Anyway, back to Aprilia. If you thought the 2020 model was the peak, it wasn't. Because for the 2021 year, Aprilia once more updated their RSV4 with again more power. Well, not exactly more power, but a larger engine was used, now upgraded to 1099cc. Now, the reason behind Aprilia increased their engine size is mostly because they had to make the RSV4 Euro 5 compliant, and they wanted to do this while still producing the 217 horsepower number. It was the only way Aprilia could maintain their top power number while also being emissions compliant. And although horsepower wasn't changed, torque was slightly improved. Now, although the engine size was increased, it's not the biggest story with the RSV4. Aprilia managed to completely reshape and change their RSV4 while still keeping its signature look. All new fairings and bodywork was updated. Aprilia was committed to improving their aerodynamics. They designed their new bodywork using a wind tunnel. They improved their RSV4's aeros at high speeds, which helped aid in increasing the air pressure in the airbox and increase downforce. And the most noticeable change is now the integrated winglets. No longer do they stick out like an airplane. Now they are elegantly designed to integrate into the fairings. And these winglets are not an aesthetic piece either. They are completely functional. Not only do they provide more downforce to help in aiding that front end from wheeling at high speeds, but also to help improve engine cooling by allowing air to pass through and plant the front end down while pulling heat away from the engine and directing it away from the rider. So because of these winglets, your bike runs cooler and the rider does too. And of course, they still look really cool too, even though that isn't their main purpose. And the updates don't stop there either. The headlights are also improved, still keeping with the RSV4's iconic triple headlight design, but now they have a neat trick to them. They are equipped with perimeter DRL lights. These new modern LED lights include a bending lights function, which means that a pair of supplementary lights will illuminate the inside of a corner, which helps improve visibility in low light situations. The bodywork wasn't just about aerodynamics either, it also improved ergonomics as well. Thanks to the new fuel tank and seat, the rider now has more space and allows for a more natural and relaxed riding position. Aprilia also increased the size of their TFT instrumentation panel, and a whole new ECU was added along with refined electronics to help improve functionality. Multi-engine brake control was now implemented, and consequently we see 6 riding modes, 3 for the track, 2 of which are customizable, and 3 for the road, 1 of which is customizable. The chassis was also drastically updated with an all-new swing arm that is lighter and now has a reinforced lower brace. It was inspired by the one that the Aprilia RSGP used in MotoGP, designed to lower masses and increase stability of the rear end under acceleration. In typical Aprilia fashion, the new RSV4 was offered in two different flavors, the regular RSV4 and a factory model. Both bikes feature a 1099cc V4 engine, but the factory includes forged aluminum wheels along with higher performance Öhlins suspension and Brembo brake calipers. 2022 got no updates, but an ultra dark colorway was added for the factory model. And pretty much the same story for 2023, except they added a new limited edition livery which was used for the factory model. And the only update for the 2024 model year was the new Ultra Gold livery, but luckily for us, there was one final update. And our final update is for the 2025 model year. Although still mostly resembling the older model, this new 2025 RSV4 has larger front aero integrated into the front fairing. This massive chin spoiler was implemented to help tame the now world-leading 220 horsepower engine, up from last year's 217 power figure thanks to a new set of larger throttle bodies and a new exhaust system. The aerodynamic improvements resulted in an improved drag coefficient along with better wheelie management. This new RSV4 has the same old Öhlins suspension, but now includes new updated high-pure radial-mounted 4-piston Brembo calipers. Along with that, a new 5-inch full-color TFT display was added, and this one features a fuel gauge, along with an exclusive race dash feature for the factory edition. Speaking of the factory edition, at the cost of just $26,000 over the $19,000 base model, nets you the factory edition model, and it offers you a few different features. First off, you get the aforementioned Öhlins suspension versus the base you get the SAC suspension. The factory also provides forged aluminum wheels along with an included GPS module which allows the front suspension, wheelie control, and traction control to be adjusted on a corner-by-corner basis. With the aim being track improvements, the factory is given a lane pit limiter, launch control, multimedia connectivity, and, as mentioned before, a special race dashboard. Additionally, some street-friendly features also found their way into the factory model. These include cruise control and cornering lights. Both models offered customizable riding modes via in-app purchases, which means you can adapt advanced settings without visiting the dealer. This advanced setup includes adaptive and predictive components for traction control and wheelie control, processing real-time data to ensure smooth, precise control. The RSV4 continues to use its 6-axis inertial platform, ride-by-wire throttle, and 3 riding modes that integrate with the cornering ABS and the APRC system, along with advanced wheelie control function that actually learns the rider's tendencies and makes micro adjustments along the way. Some people believe the best superbike is the one that is the fastest and makes the most power. Others believe it's the one that has the best handling and chassis, while some proclaim that the technology and features are what truly separate one superbike from the rest. And for others, it's whatever bike looks the nicest and sounds the best. It's hard to argue against that the RSV4 has had all of these attributes throughout multiple points of its existence. It has blown the world away with top horsepower numbers, top-of-the-line suspension, brakes that stop on a dime, and class-leading technology, armed with a powerful V4 engine that has a unique sound to it and feel to it while you ride. Designed by Italians to look good from any angle, the RSV4 has competed and won Superbike championships and became a legend. It's impossible to argue against what Aprilia has done with their RSV4. They've found limits and then shattered them with new updates throughout the years, and even a groundbreaking model announced for next year. Aprilia continues to show the world what a pure superbike can be. The RSV4 is a gift to all riders, even those who will never ride one, as it exemplifies everything a superbike is meant to be: fast, agile, technologically advanced, and even an aesthetic masterpiece. Anyway, thank you all so much for making it to the end of this video. I worked really hard on this video. Well over 120 hours went into this. It would mean a lot to me if you guys could leave a like and subscribe for more motorcycle related content. And if you guys are interested in watching more videos, I have a full history video on Suzuki's GSX-R, or if you are more of a fan of Honda, you should watch my full history video on the VFR, or my Fireblade history video. Anyway, thanks again everyone, and I will see you all in the next one.